we do not like them and we do not accept them.
And inside Tunisia's parliament, scenes this country could only have dreamt of. Opposition politicians vent their anger at the RCD. The former ruling party was suspended on Sunday, but their members of parliament have retained their seats for now at least. And there were more big changes. An emergency vote was passed which gives extra powers to the interim president. So crucially, an election date can now be decided. Tunisia's Prime Minister told me it's an important step.
We will be able to fulfill our responsibilities, engage in a democratic path, and ensure human rights and fundamental liberties, as well as move our country forward.
What the Prime Minister, Mohamed Ghannouchi, is trying to do is unite Parliament and also the country behind this interim government. He says it's the only way not only to solve the economic situation, but also to bring back security to the streets. There's still frustration here. These protesters blame the police for the deaths of 3 demonstrators in the past few days. Weeks on from the Jasmine Revolution that brought about a dictator's downfall, violence and tension still remain. Nazanin Mashiri, Al Jazeera, Tunis.
The party of Myanmar pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi is calling for talks with Western governments to discuss sanctions on the country. The NLD wants existing restrictions to remain, but some experts say this could further divide the opposition and harm foreign investment. Al Jazeera's special correspondent in Myanmar has more.
Well, since Aung San Suu Kyi was released last November, there seemed to be indications that the Nobel laureate and her party, the NLD, were considering supporting what has been seen as a widespread push for a lifting of sanctions. We heard suggestions of this in her many speeches, including at Davos just last week. However, it is clear now that the party is sticking to its position on the issue. It's being seen as a major blow to the other opposition groups that have been calling for sanctions to be lifted. Over the last few weeks, we've spoken to many of these leading opposition voices in the country, and the general consensus among them is that these sanctions have only hurt the poor and done little to curb the lifestyle of the ruling military-backed government. One of the clear examples of this is the capital of Naypyidaw, where military figures run and profit from some of the most luxurious hotels in the country. At the same time, the average per capita income for people here is less than $500 a year. And opposition voices point to this fact and say people are desperate for international factories to come into this country to provide desperately needed jobs. However, it is very much a catch-22 situation. Speaking to some of Aung San Suu Kyi's people over the last few days, they tell us the concern is that by opening the doors, Myanmar will follow the way of countries like Vietnam, where political rule is in fact strengthened by improving economics in a country and where corruption becomes further institutionalized. What other opposition groups, apart from the NLD, are calling for is targeted sanctions, more specifically geared towards a ban on such things as the sale of arms, perhaps a freezing of offshore bank accounts. On the sidelines of this debate, overall, is a general concern that Aung San Suu Kyi's position is further marginalizing herself and her party and dividing an opposition in this country that has grown increasingly fractious.
The Cambodian government says heavy shelling by the Thai army has caused part of an 11th century temple to collapse. Fighting over the past 4 days has forced thousands of Thai villagers to flee the disputed border region. Hundreds of Cambodians have also been evacuated. Both countries lay claim to the area. The former Liberian President Charles Taylor will hear the prosecution's closing arguments at the UN-backed Special Court for Sierra Leone on Tuesday. Taylor faces 11 charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Prosecutors at The Hague say Taylor used terror tactics to secure control of diamond mines in Sierra Leone, but he denies all the charges, including using child soldiers in wars which killed 250,000 people in West Africa. In Mexico, 3 teenage boys have been shot dead in an apparent gang attack in the border city of Ciudad Juarez. They're among 5 people killed in the latest drug-related violence. Frank Contreras has more from Mexico City.
Mexicans are mourning the deaths of at least 5 more people in drug-related violence. The first case happened in the northern Mexican city of Ciudad Juarez, located just across the border from Texas. It appears now that 3 teenagers were killed over the weekend in drug-related violence. They were sitting down having lunch at a taco stand. They got up to look at some auto parts, and apparently a group of armed men decided to show up and opened fire on those young men. U.S. authorities and U.S. officials, school officials, are now confirming that at least 2 of those teenagers were indeed U.S. citizens. The families say it was a case of mistaken identity. And in the Pacific coastal city of Tepic, Nayarit, bodyguards who were protecting a high-ranking naval officer were killed at a shopping center. The officer had just gotten out of his vehicle, went into a restaurant when armed men decided to open fire, killing those 2 bodyguards in front of what were probably hundreds of eyewitnesses, those eyewitnesses running for cover and waiting for protection for at least an hour until the area was secure. And so the kind of drug-related violence that has plagued Mexico continues here, with more than 35,000 people killed since President Felipe Calderón launched his war on drugs in December 2006.
A former Philippine military chief and cabinet minister accused of massive corruption has died in an apparent suicide. Witnesses say retired General Angelo Reyes was visiting his mother's grave when he died from a single gunshot wound to the chest. Reyes, who headed the armed forces from 2001 to 2003, was recently accused of pocketing at least $1 million of military funds. He had denied the accusations. A fire has swept through several warehouses in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, destroying costumes and floats that were to be used in the city's upcoming carnival. Fire crews battled for 4 hours to control the blaze. Some samba schools lost 90% of their stock, but Rio's mayor says the carnival, scheduled for early next month, will still go ahead. It's a gloomy market for job seekers in Japan, and it seems like they need all the encouragement they can get. In downtown Tokyo, cheerleaders and performers rally a 1,000-strong crowd of college graduates. The annual event is organised by schools across Japan to motivate students ahead of graduation day in March. Years of economic stagnation has made Japan's employment market particularly tough. Now, a reminder of our top story here on Al Jazeera. Protesters in Egypt are calling for more mass rallies on Tuesday. Well, let's talk to Mohammed Waked. He's a member of the National Movement for Change. It's known popularly as Kefaya. He joins us now from Cairo. Mohammed, it's day 15 of the protest. Tell us what's going on in Tahrir Square now at the moment.
At the moment, you have the people who are sleeping in Tahrir. They're starting the shifts who are overseeing the barricades are being changed, and the people who are sleeping are waking up to take their place. And you have small demonstrations moving in the square itself.
And what's life been like for you personally in the square?
Actually, it's been a glorious week, 10 days altogether. It's been characterized by a lot of, I would say, a lot of conflicting sentiments. One day you're very optimistic. In the afternoon, you're a bit worried about what's going on. So there is a lot of conflicting sentiments. But as far as the material aspect of sitting in Tahrir, it's been people have been helping each other. So this is not the how would I put it? It's not really a hassle as much as people try to portray it. We've been able to get our food still in, despite they've been trying to stop food from getting in. We've been able to get our blankets in, despite the fact that they've been arresting people, anybody who walks around with a blanket. So we've been able to manage this. The solidarity is so high, and everybody's trying to help us. So we've managed to counter all of their attempts to make sitting in Tahrir a miserable act. In fact, it's a very glorious moment, and we're all optimistic now.
Okay, and just tell us quickly about your movement, the National Movement for Change. It's known in Egypt as Kefaya. It's obviously a grassroots coalition. I mean, what's your organisation been doing in the square?
The square, let me just clarify one thing. The square is basically an uncontrollable square. So there are a lot of political movements, but no one can control the square. What they do is they make shifts at the barricades and try to get as much supplies in as possible. But we can't control the square in the sense that movements can do much about what the square does, except defend the demands. So sometimes you'd find debates about the people in the square, and here the political movements play an important role in keeping it intact and not enduring compromises that would preempt the revolution, let's say.
All right, Mohammed Wakad, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Anytime.
Now, just before we go, quick reminder, you can keep up to date with all the news on our website. There it is on your screen. The address, of course, aljazeera.net/English. That's aljazeera.net/English. All the latest news, of course, on